We are in Daf Samach Gimel Amid Aleph 63a at the end of the Mishnah. We saw the Mishnah said that the Torah says that there's a prohibition of shechting, of bringing the carbon Pesach while you're still in possession of chametz. Now, who is in possession and where that needs to be is what the Gemara is going to address. We also saw the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that says not only the carbon Pesach, but also the precursor to the carbon Pesach, which is the daily offering at the end of the day of the afternoon offering, which according to Rabbi Yehuda would also transgress if somebody has chametz at that time. According to Rabbi Yehuda, they would also transgress the prohibition of having chametz in possession. And Rabbi Shimon says really any carbon that you bring, as long as it's valid, either on the day, either on the day of the 14th or through Pesach, if you bring a carbon that turns out to be valid, that means shchita re'uya. It was shechted in a way that it would count. That would be a transgression of the prohibition of having shechting on chametz if you have chametz in possession. Amar Rav Shimon ben Lakish. So Rish Lakish said, either the person who shechts the carbon or spritzes the blood of the Pesach onto the mizbeach, if either one of those have chametz in possession, and now we turn to Samach Gimel Amid Beis, or if any member of the group designated to be a part of this carbon Pesach, if any of them have it, that would be a transgression. So it's got to be any one of these: the person shechting, the person spritzing, or one of the members of the group. And another prerequisite in order to transgress, according to Rish Lakish, is actually imoy ba'azara. He has to have the chametz with him in the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash while it's prohibited already, and while the carbon is being shechted. However, Rabbi Yochanan disagrees, and he says, now, even if it is not with him in the courtyard, he just has it in possession in Yerushalayim. So what's the basis of the machlokas here? Why does Rish Lakish say it has to be with him, whereas Rabbi Yochanan says it doesn't have to be with him exactly, it can be elsewhere. Now, Ilem Ba'al Besamuch Kimipalgi is the basis that when the Torah says the word al, upon, does it mean that it's near him? And here the Torah says, do not bring the carbon Pesach, do not shecht the carbon Pesach, slaughter the carbon Pesach, al lesichchat chametz dam zivchi, upon chametz, the blood of my carbon of the offering. Now, it doesn't mean literally on, meaning that you're slaughtering over chametz, right? So what does on mean? Upon, not directly on it, so rather that you still have it. Well, where? Does the meaning of al mean close by, or does it mean that you just have it in possession somewhere? That's really the basis of this machlokas. If that's the basis, the Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish sava al b'samach. Rabbi Shimon Lakish says, when it says the word al, it needs to be nearby. Rabbi Yochanan sava being on al b'samach, and he says that even though the Torah says al upon, it doesn't need to be nearby. So that would fit. The problem is we already have that same exact disagreement between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish in regards to another matter. We talked about that there are a family of, or if you would call it that, of karbanos, of offerings in the family of shalamim, peace offerings. You have the toda, the Thanksgiving offering. That's for somebody that was ill, for instance, and became better. They bring a toda offering, just as Pesach is a Thanksgiving offering for coming out of Mitzrayim, which we bring in Pesach. So in the same family, there's another one called toda. We talked about this, and the carbon toda is a carbon that would that besides for the carbon itself that you bring, which is a shalamim, there's also a requirement to bring 40 breads, lachmei toda, and the lachmei toda are 4 sets of 10 breads, and you dedicate it, you donate the flour or the breads, so that just becomes a monetary donation. It actually becomes a carbon, a part of the carbon itself. Once the animal is shechted, that's when the breads become sanctified. But there too, it says that you will bring this toda upon its breads. So about that same word, we already have a machlokas between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. So why would they need to say the same disagreement here? They already disagreed about this there. The Tanan milot hashechet toda lefnim v'lachma chutz l'chayma. Bring the carbon toda, whoever slaughtered it improperly inside the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash. But the breads are still outside. So the breads would not become sanctified. That's what the halacha is. Now, explaining that Mishnah, what does it mean if it's outside, it's not sanctified? What does it mean outside the walls? So Rabbi Yochanan says, you know what it means? It means outside the walls of Yerushalayim, beyond the place called Beis Pagi. But if it's outside the walls of the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash, that's going to be enough to sanctify it, because it's close enough, even though it says upon those breads. Yes, it's upon, because it's in Yerushalayim. It doesn't need to be immediately nearby. However, Rabbi Shimon Lakish says no. Even if it's outside of the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash, meaning they could be mere feet away. One is inside the courtyard, and the breads are outside the courtyard. It's not going to sanctify it. Alma be'inan al b'samach. So you see, according to Rish Lakish, when the Torah said al, that it should be upon those breads, it has to be nearby. So we already know that concept in Machlokes. So why do we need another disagreement about it here? So the Gemara says perhaps over here it's based on a different Machlokes. Ela b'hasra safek impalgi. The basis on hasra safek. The general prohibitions that somebody transgresses, if they do so, it's punishable by lashes. Any punishment really by Beis Din requires 2 witnesses that will have warned they or someone would have warned the perpetrator with a warning, telling them, do not do A. In this case, let's say shecht the korban pesach while you're in possession of chametz, because if you do so, you will transgress this prohibition of having chametz in possession when you shecht the korban pesach, and it is punishable by lashes. You have to give them all those warning, that warning, and they have to respond, yeah, even so, I don't care. So and that's the concept of hasra. However, there's a concept of hasra as safek, which means if you warn someone, but you don't know whether they're going to transgress or not, that shouldn't count as hasra, as a proper hasra. It should only count if you see them immediately prior to doing the action. So therefore, that's going to count as a hasra, a warning. But if you don't know that the action is ever going to happen, that shouldn't count as a hasra, as a warning. And so the Gemara says, okay, so here too, you don't know whether or not this person has chametz, because it could be in their house. So therefore, Reish Lakish says you can only transgress or be held liable, really. Rabbi Reish Lakish wouldn't be discussing in our Mishnah the transgression as much as the punishment, and that you cannot be held liable for your actions unless you actually have it with you, the chametz with you. So then when somebody warns you, they say, look, you got chametz in your hand, you cannot have that in possession when the carbon is being brought. But having it at home, you simply don't know. So that's a warning without a knowledge, and it wouldn't that it's about to the transgression is about to happen, and so it wouldn't count. So that's a plausible explanation to the machlokas here. However, that too is already a disagreement between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. So why do we need this additional teaching here? This already, there's a machlokas elsewhere about this. The Itma, it says, somebody says, I swear I will eat this bread today. And the day passed, and he did not eat it. So Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, both Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish had a tradition and said somebody like this does not get punished for the transgression of having not kept an oath. However, the reasoning is different. Rabbi Yochanan says the reason why it doesn't get punished for this transgression is because it was an inactive transgression. It was a passive transgression. When the end of the day came and he didn't actively eat this bread, so he transgressed. But it was an inaction that brought him to it. He made an oath, and then lack of eating it, it's sitting there, and not doing the action he needed to do is what caused the transgression. And as a rule, he says, and you don't get lashes for a passive transgression of prohibition. It would have to be that there's an action involved in the transgression. But the fact that this is a warning, whoever warned him would warn him without knowing whether or not they're going to transgress, meaning because you got 3 hours left in the day, say, don't you can't not eat this. You have to eat it because otherwise you're going to not have kept your oath. You swore to eat it. Well, maybe he will. At all moments, he may he may still end up doing it. It's really only if this person is giving warnings all the way to the end of the day that it would count as a proper warning. However, Rish Lakish says you correct Rabbi Yochanan that there's no punishment for this transgression of the oath, but it's on account of that this person could not have had a proper warning because it's asra safek. Each time that the warning was given, it would not have been about to the moment that they're going to transgress. However, but a passive transgression is punishable. So in any case, we already see that this machlokas of hasra safek, a warning in doubt, whether that counts or not, is a machlokas. So why would we need our Mishnah to repeat in our Mishnah? Why wouldn't we need Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish to again explain their disagreement? So the Gemara says, let's go back to our first explanation, and that it's not a question of whether or not it's punishable, but rather whether there's a transgression at all. And the reason for the machlokas is whether when the Torah says al, upon, don't shecht the korban pesach, upon chametz, it doesn't mean on it directly. It also doesn't mean that it's somewhere distant, according to Rish Lakish. It has to be nearby. And even though we discussed this in another place already in regards to the breads of the Toda offering, but over here we may have made a distinction, and that's why we need the teaching in both places. It's richa, and we need it. The efligu le'ini chametz avamina ba'hu the amar the kamar Rabbi Yochanan the le'be'inam al b'samach mishum the isru v'chalei the isay. Perhaps Rabbi Yochanan only said it in our version, meaning if this statement of disagreement between the two had only been taught to us in our context. Maybe in our context, Rabbi Yochanan says that there's a transgression even wherever the chametz is, because you know what? The Torah says don't have chametz, and wherever you have it, you're transgressing. You're not supposed to have chametz regardless of the korban pesach. You're not supposed to have chametz, and so the prohibition, wherever it is a transgression. But maybe in regards to the sanctification of the breads that come along with the Toda offering, that requires within the courtyard itself. Maybe he would agree that over there, al means besamach, the be'inan al besamach, that it has to be nearby. And therefore only if it's inside the courtyard is it sanctified, and if not, it's not sanctified. Mida de hava kli sharis, and we find this concept elsewhere that sanctifying certain parts of a meal offering, or oil, or wine, or even water, parts of the offerings, are all these would be sanctified once they're placed in the vessel of the Kodesh, in a sanctified vessel. So too over here, in order for the breads to become sanctified, they would have to be in the courtyard, just like they have to be in the vessel. And so perhaps there's a distinction between the transgression of chametz, wherever it is. Rabbi Yochanan says it's going to be a transgression, and you don't need al besamach. You don't need it to be nearby, even though the Torah calls it upon. Whereas in regards to the breads, al does need to be besamach. That when the Torah said upon the breads, it would have to be nearby. That's what the Toda offering is brought with the breads already in the courtyard, as we see in regards to the something in a vessel, that it becomes sanctified once it's inside the vessel. And therefore we needed Rabbi Yochanan to tell us that in both places it's not going to need to be directly nearby. And if we had only taught this teaching in regards to the breads being sanctified along with the Toda offering, perhaps only over there Reish Lakish requires it to be nearby in the same reasoning. Because maybe over there he's strict and says, look, it's got to be nearby, and if it's not inside, it's not going to count as being sanctified, just as we saw in regards to the vessel sanctifying whatever is in it. But in regards to chametz, maybe he agrees to Rabbi Yochanan. Maybe he'll agree that, look, as far as the transgression of chametz goes, it doesn't have to be nearby. Wherever you have it, you're going to transgress. Therefore, we needed a teaching in both places to tell us that Reish Lakish, both in regards to having the offering nearby as well as having the chametz nearby, it's only going to count if it's directly nearby, because the Torah said al b'samach, it has to be nearby. So we have this machlokes, Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan says it doesn't have to be right there with you in order to transgress having chametz while bringing the offering, and Reish Lakish says it needs to be nearby in the courtyard. The one who does the slaughtering, the shechting of the offering, doesn't have the chametz, but one of the members of the group that are associated with this carbon do. Mahu. What's the halacha? Does he transgress or not for having shechted it? Amalei miksiv le'sishchat al chamtzacha. It doesn't say do not slaughter upon your own chametz. Le'sishchat al chametz. Don't slaughter upon chametz. Ksiv. Amalei hachi afilu echad b'sof ha'olam. Well, if it just says don't slaughter on chametz, well, somebody at the end of the world can have chametz. If you say that, it doesn't mean people that are associated with the carbon. Actually, the full verse says, do not slaughter upon chametz, upon leavened bread, the blood of my offering. And do not keep leave to the next morning the carbon itself. So we have two prohibitions in the pasuk. We have the one transgression. The one prohibition is not to shech the offering, the Pesach, when you have chametz in your possession, and one and do not leave over the carbon until the morning. The Pesach offering until the morning. So we see that these are associated prohibitions. What's the association? The ones that have the prohibition of, or the responsibility of completing and eating the carbon before the morning comes, those are the people that are going to transgress if they have chametz. but it can't just be chametz to some random person elsewhere in the world. Amra Papa. So our Papa clarifies. Therefore, hilkach kohen amakter esachelev, the kohen who does the parts that go onto the altar as well. He would transgress because he has the prohibition of allowing. He has the obligation to complete the offering on this very day and can't leave it until the morning. So if he had not completed putting the fats of the offerings onto the mizbeach, onto the altar by the morning, he will have transgressed, and therefore he has the second part of the verse's prohibition of not leaving the offering till the morning. So therefore, his chametz as well would be a transgression if he's in possession of chametz when the carbon is brought. Tanaka Vaseda, our Papa, we have a brisa that concurs with that. Somebody who brings the offering of Pesach when they're in possession of chametz, they transgress the Torah prohibition. As long as the chametz belongs to either the one who shechts or the one who spritzes the blood on the mizbeach, or to one of the members of the group. If there's chametz belongs to someone elsewhere in the world, that doesn't make a difference. You're not obligated to take care of that. And whoever slaughtered it will transgress, or the one who spritzes will transgress, or even the one who brings the offerings up onto the fire will transgress. But somebody who essentially slaughters the bird offering, which is done in a way called malika, they would not transgress. The Gemara soon is going to address what kind of bird offering are you talking about that they would be bringing. Are we talking about just a general offering? And this is in concurrence with Rabbi Shimon, the last opinion in the Mishnah that says any valid offering is going to be a transgression, and then it would have to be the reason why you do not transgress on the 14th by having chametz when you bring this is because it's not a valid offering at this point, because it's supposed to have been brought earlier in the day. And we picked the bird offering simply as an example because it's more likely to have been forgotten during the day before the afternoon Tamid offering. Or is this talking about a case that we had earlier where someone was Tamid and went to the mikveh, and they can now bring the Tamid offering, but the Pesach offering, but they cannot eat it until they bring a bird offering, which they had forgotten to bring. This is called Mechusar Kippurim, somebody who's lacking an offering, an atonement offering. And so they bring this, even though that the afternoon offering had been already been brought. And so really you're not supposed to bring any other offering besides for Pesach. But in order to eat the Pesach, they have to bring the bird offering. And that would make it a valid offering. Yet this Mishnah would be saying that there's no transgression of chametz, and the Gemara is going to address that. So then somebody like this would not transgress anything for bringing the bird offering at this point. But we have a contradiction, a brisa that contradicts this teaching, which we just said that hamaktir, somebody who brings the offering up onto the altar and burns it, also transgresses if there's chametz in someone's possession. Somebody who shechts the offering, the Pesach, upon chametz, meaning somebody's in possession of chametz, they will transgress. Rabbi Yehuda Emer Afatamid, and Rabbi Yehuda says not only the Pesach offering, but even the daily Tamid offering would be a transgression. To which the Chachamim say, no, it's only about the Pesach. It says, don't bring my Pesach offering on chametz. And when is the transgression? If one of the members of the group, or the one who shechts, or the one who spritzes, has chametz in possession. Of course, if there's somebody far out in the world that has chametz, that's not going to be a transgression for the person who brings the chametz, brings the carbon. And then it says whether you shecht the animal, spritz the blood, whether you do malika on a bird or you spritz its blood, chayiv, you will transgress. So now there are a couple of contradictions here. But then it says, aval hakoymitzas mincha. Somebody who does the kamitza of a mincha offering, which is taking a fistful of the meal offering and putting it on the mizbeach, or he will not transgress. Similarly, somebody brings the parts that need to go on the fire on the altar, and they bring them up. Will not transgress. So that's the second contradiction. In the first brisa, it said that the malika of the birds not going to be a transgression, and in the second brisa it says it is. In the first brisa it says that the one who brings the fats onto the mizbeach, the maktir, the one who literally the smoke of fire, the one who brings the limbs up or the parts up onto the offering onto the altar on the fire to have it burn up. They would transgress if there's chametz in possession of someone owning and part of this carbon. And the second brisa says no, that the one who brings it up to burn is not going to transgress. So that's the second contradiction. So now on Samach Dalet Amud Aleph, Kashi Malika, Kashi Ktara Ktara, we have a contradiction in the Malika of birds and a contradiction in the burning up of the parts on the Mizbeach. So Gemara says, well, based on what you're saying, we have a self-contradiction in the Brisa itself. First, we said it only applies to the Korban Pesach, right? And the Korban Pesach doesn't have any of these other kabbanas. And then you say that the transgression applies not only to the Pesach offering, because it says applies even to someone who's going to do Malika, which is a bird offering, and the Korban Pesach cannot be a bird offering. So rather, the Brisa must be the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, who we saw in our Mishnah, we mentioned just a moment ago, says that any valid shechita, any valid offering is going to be a transgression, not only on the 14th, but throughout Pesach. Any valid offering that's brought, and with it, the owner, whoever brings it, or whoever spritzes it, or whoever does a part, has chametz in possession, they will transgress this prohibition. And it's not only about the Korban Pesach, it's throughout the 14th and the rest of Pesach that there would be a transgression. And therefore, malika lekasha. There's no contradiction about malika, about the bird offering. Kan bar ba'asar. On the 14th, the bird offering would not be a prohibition because it's not a valid offering anymore, because it's after the tamid offer, the end of the day daily offering. And the other is talking about during Chol HaMoed, where somebody's bringing a bird offering and they have in possession, or the molek, the one who does the malika, the slaughter, has in possession chametz. V'idi Rabbi Shimon, and they're both in the opinion of Rabbi Shimon that this applies not only to the Pesach and not only to the daily offering, like Rabbi Yehuda says, the daily offering in which comes immediately prior to the Pesach, but to any valid offering. And the contradiction between the two brises in regards to the one who brings the parts up onto the mizbeach to burn it up, Tanai, those are two opinions as to what Rabbi Shimon's opinion was. There are those that say just as the one who slaughtered, so too the one who brings the parts on the mizbeach, and they say that they are both are a part of the offering, since you're not allowed to leave the spritzing of the blood, which is explicit in the pasuk. It says the blood of my offering. So just as the blood of the offering may not be left until the next morning, so too any part of the offering that may not be left to the next morning, there's a transgression for someone that is in possession of chametz. And the other says no, you can't compare the two. There's the spritzing of the blood, which is necessary before they would eat, and therefore that part is whoever does that part. If there's they or someone is in possession of chametz, there's someone in this group is possession of chametz, they're going to transgress, and the other the person bringing the kohen bringing the parts that go on the mizbeach, they would not transgress because they didn't do anything and they're not a part of this. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Afatam. In our Mishnah, it said that the first opinion said only whoever brings the Pesach offering, if they or the group are in possession of chametz, is a transgression. Rabbi Yehuda says no, it's one step before that. Even the last chametz of the last korban of the daily korban, the tamid, the afternoon tamid, it also is a part of this because it's a prerequisite to the Pesach. And if you're in possession of chametz at that point, which is already done at a time that it's prohibited to be in possession of chametz, you're going to transgress. My time in Rabbi Yehuda, what's the basis? Amalachai says, Zivchi zevach hamiyochid li. It says, upon my offering. What's my offering? The one that's dedicated to me. What does that mean? That's the daily offering every single day, and that's miyuchid. That's specific to me, as opposed to the Pesach, which you all are going to eat. Rabbi Shimon says, Pesach ba'asar, that the 14th day, the valid offering would be the Pesach, and that's when there's going to be transgression. And for the rest of Chag, any other offering that's a valid offering would be a transgression if you're in possession of chametz. My time at Rabbi Shimon. What's the basis for Rabbi Shimon? Zivchi trezim. It actually says my offering twice. Karibe zevach zevachi. And so read it as if the possessive yud at the end is actually servicing both of the words, my offering. And so it says, if you have the double possessive, it will be my plural possessive, which means my offerings, meaning any of the offerings. And then there's the singular, just zevach. So why then did the Torah say twice my offering, which makes it singular possessive, and instead of just saying once zevachai, which would be my plural possessive, all of my offerings. To tell you just offering itself, at the time that is zevach lemechayev azevachai, bezman deleka zevach mechayev azevachai. That to tell you that at the time of the Korban Pesach, at the time that the proper offering is being brought, and no other offerings are allowed to be brought at that point, so it's not going to count as a valid offering. All the other offerings won't count as valid because they're not allowed to be brought. There's no transgression for them. It would have to be a shchita re'uya, a slaughtering or an offering of that is valid when it's shechted, and then it's going to count as a valid offering if. And then, since it's a valid offering, you also are in possession of chametz. That's going to be the transgression. So the Mishnah said that if you had during Chol HaMoed, if you had a leftover Pesach that was supposed to have been brought on the 14th. Let's say you lost it and couldn't find it. We'll see some of these scenarios later. And so you went and replaced it, and then you find it. So now you have this lamb that's been dedicated as a Pesach, which we talked about multiple times now, that a Pesach beyond the 14th in the afternoon is going to be a shlamim. The Gemara asks, does it automatically become a shlamim, or does it need to be redefined? You have to uproot it, as it were, from being a Pesach into its general family of Shalomim and to make it a Shalomim. And the Gemara wants to learn this based on the wording of our Mishnah, where Rabbi Shimon said the Pesach Shaloi Lashma, you brought it specifically as a Shalomim, not for what it was designated, which indicates that you have to actively remove it from Pesach to make it something else. Time of the Shaloi L'Shmai, that you brought it specifically for something else. But if you didn't think anything, you brought the Korban Pesach, which had been dedicated as a Pesach and should have been brought on the 14th, and you didn't. It's now the 18th, in middle of Chol HaMoed of Pesach, and you bring it, it should be a Shalomim at this point. Does it automatically happen that way? And therefore, even if you had no intent, it's a valid Shalomim, or do you have to specifically think of it as Shalomim? The indication in the Mishnah is you have to specifically think of it as Shalomim. Why do I have to specifically think it's Pesach all year round? It automatically becomes a Shalomim. Shmas Mina, perhaps from here we can deduce Pesach b'shayim esashana b'yakira, that you have to specifically uproot it, meaning you have to intentionally remove it from being a Pesach and change it to become a Shlamim. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Gamda and Nizukam and Pichabura. So Rabbi Chia bar Gamda said that this became the conversation in the academy, in the yeshiva, in the group. Everybody essentially said this. Va'amru kugayin sheyabailam tameyames. This is talking about the reason why you need specifically to uproot it is in a unique case, where the reason the korban wasn't brought on the 14th was not because they lost it or forgot. The reason is because the owner had become tamei, and therefore they can't make a Pesach on the 14th. They are now pushed off to the 14th of the next month, Pesach Sheni, the 14th of Iyar, where they bring a make-up date for Pesach if they were tamei. And therefore, this is still valid for them to be a future Pesach in a month from now. And therefore, unless they uproot it, it's still going to remain a Pesach. But indeed, if somebody had no reason to keep this as a Pesach, because 14th is missed, by the time next year Pesach is going to be too old because it has to be within its first year, so that's not going to be a Pesach. And so in that case, that indeed you don't need to uproot it; it automatically becomes a shlamim. But over here, Pesach Sheni, since they are pushed off to Pesach Sheni, the stami l'shem Pesach kain, it still remains a Pesach by default, and therefore, unless they uproot it and specifically think of it as a shlamim, it's not going to count as a shlamim.
I would think that if you were tamei on Pesach Rishon, and you have a korban that's been designated as a korban Pesach, and you know you're going to bring it on Pesach Sheni, how could you change it and make it a shlamim between Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni? Yeah, but that would be tomorrow, wouldn't it?
Why? I don't need it today. I can make another one later.
But you already designated that particular lamb. You designated,
and I'm going to change it into a shlamim.
But before Pesach Sheni, you could do it.
Just like any Pesach. What does it mean? A Pesach all year round is not only if you missed Pesach, it can be even in advance of Pesach. I changed it. You know what? I dedicated it as a Pesach. I'm going to change it as a shlamim, because all year round the Pesach is essentially a shlamim. It's in the family of shlamim.
So that's the chiddush that you could do it. You couldn't do it for any other korban. Once you've designated it, that's it. You got to bring it.
A Pesach all year round is a shlamim.
Mm-hmm. So even between Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni, it's still a shlamim.
Correct. Okay, the next Mishnah is going to tell us a little bit about the process of how this was done. All the Jews had to bring or send someone to bring their korban Pesach. So a Pesach nishchet b'shalosh kitas. It always has to have 3 groups, as the Gemara is going to say, at least of 30 people, in order to bring the korban Pesach. So you needed 3 groups of at least 30. Shenema. And why do you need 3 groups? Because it says v'shachatu isa kol ka'al adas Yisrael. It says, and they will bring it as an offering, the entirety of the community of the congregation of Yisrael. So there are 3 terms for the groups. So 3 groups, or 3 terms of 10 of minyan. So you'd need 30 in each group. And since we're not sure, the Gemara is going to explain, you need 3 groups of 30. Kahal ve'edav Yisrael. Nichnasa katarishana. The first group came in. Nesmala azara. As soon as the courtyard is full, na'alu dalsis azara. They closed the doors of the courtyard. Taka varia taku. They blew the shofar. Tekiya terua tekiya. Hakahanim oimdim shuras biyideim bezichei kesav bezichei zav. And the kahanim stood in rows from the slaughter area up to the altar, and it's going to explain what they were doing. And every alternate row had a gold vessel, gold cups that were rounded bottoms so that it can't be put down. And every alternate row had a silver one. So it looked gold, silver for the beauty. Shura shakula kesef, shura shakula zav, gold and silver. And they were not interchanged. And these bowls didn't have bottoms, rather they were rounded. Because maybe somebody's going to put it down by mistake and the blood will harden in there, congeal. Shachat Yisrael. So when somebody shechted, v'kibel hakohen, and the kohen had to be the one to receive the blood. Nosel chavera, and then he'd take that vessel that within it which he received the blood, and he would hand it off to crossing his body to the next Kohen. The Kohen would then take it and pass it to the next Kohen. And while doing that, he would bring back an empty vessel and hand it back. And so this is the action that they kept on doing, their hands crossing across the body to take vessels and then passing it off to the other side. And this is the assembly line that went all the way to the Mizbeach. He received the full one and returned the empty one. And the Kohen that was closest to the Mizbeach, and he would spritz it once on the eastern side of the Mizbeach of the altar, above the area that had a base, because not the entire, there wasn't a base on the entire eastern side, so it had to be above the base. The first group went out, the second group would come in. The second group went out, the third one came in. And exactly as the first one happened, so too the second and the third. Karu es a Hallel, and they also read the Hallel. Besides for the Levim singing the Hallel, the people that brought the carbon would also say the Hallel. Im Gamru Shanu, if they completed the Hallel and there was enough time, they would say it a second time. Im Shanu Shilshu, and if they said it twice and completed, they would say it a third time. Even though it never happened that in the third time they completed Hallel a third time. Rabbi Yehuda and in fact, the third group of, because everybody tried to be in the first group or the second group to get it done early, the third group had such a small crowd or so few karbanos that they never got past Ahavti, which is the section, the midsection of Hallel. Because there was only a few people left in the third group. And the way you would do it on a weekday is the way you would do it on Shabbos. However, one thing that the Chachamim did not like, and the Kahanim would do anyhow, was that they would flush out, the way they would clean the Azara, the courtyard floor, and by flushing out with water. There was a stream of water running through the courtyard, and they would plug the exit of the water so it would start building up and fill the floor with water. It was all tile, marble tile. So they would it would fill it up, and then they would unplug it, and all of the blood would wash out together with the water. Rabbi Yehuda says before they would do that, they would take a cup full of the mixture of all the blood from all the karbanos and take one cup full and spritz it. This way, in case somebody's carbon's blood didn't get spritzed, this way it'll be included in the mixture. The Chachamim didn't agree. Tomorrow morning we'll complete this Mishnah of the rest of the skinning and the rest of the part that was done on Shabbos.